This is the second part of the conversation with Mark Hayes, an organizational consultant. One of his specialties is inclusion and equity. In part one, Mark talks about growing up painfully shy and ostracized as a young person. He also had challenges with his family of origin. This second part of our conversation starts by my asking Mark about his continuing commitment to addressing racial issues. At the end of the interview, Mark references Mary Holland, a beloved friend and colleague of us both. Both parts of this conversation are dedicated to her memory. Why did you continue to challenge yourself in the racial arena? Why did,
Yeah.
why that?
Well, it's part of how can I live up to I will not cooperate in my own oppression if I suddenly leave one of the biggest areas of oppression in our country.
Wow. Okay.
And and oh my goodness, the number of friends that I have who are African American by then, and the people that I care about who are African American then. No, I mean, the song that probably started me on all this, Peter, Paul, and Mary, and it's not the ones it's not the Blowing in the Wind and all those everybody knows. Long Chain On
Long
is the song.
chain on.
I've listened to that song at least once a week from the time I was in the ninth grade, I think, when I got the record. And it's about a person in her cabin late at night getting ready for bed, and she hears some chains clanking. And so she goes to her window to look out the window, and there's a man, obviously from the song, but he's chained. He has chains on, tattered clothes, unkempt hair, a beard, and he comes up and asks politely if she can spare a biscuit or something to drink. And so she gives him that and talks about how gentle he is. And at the end, he's thanking her for what she's given him, and he's getting ready to leave. And she says, "Can I help you take the chains off?" And he looks at her and says, "No, I'm not going to give my burden to you, that I will carry these."
Whoa.
And then he walks off. So that song just has stood with me through all these years, Gene, and trying to live to that song. I remember the last time I was on a jury in Houston was right before we moved. And it was one of the tough judges that was there. So I made it into the jury paneling where you get asked the questions and stuff. It was a black young man that was on trial. They talked about there not being any eyewitnesses and stuff. And then there was this extremely double-worded question that we were asked by the attorneys that the judge said we had to answer with a yes or no, that wasn't a yes or no question. And I went through that 4 times with the judge and the attorney saying, "I'm sorry, that's not a yes or no question. And there are other factors involved in this, especially in this particular case that I can see just from being here." And judge said, "Well, do you want to be in contempt of court? Can you answer this yes or no?" And I said, "I don't want to be in contempt of court, but in good conscience, that's not a yes or no question. And I think that's an important part of what would be decided in the trial." And so I finally just got dismissed.
I was about to say that ended that.
I got dismissed pretty quickly, but she didn't hold me in contempt.
Okay, I just want to correct something. You said, "I'm not going to work in a business." There are people who will be listening to this who
Yeah.
are in businesses.
Yeah.
How do you want them to think about what you're saying?
Since 1981, I've been working in businesses,
Okay.
not nonprofit, not social work. I've been working in businesses since 1991. I've done non-technical training in energy companies. I've done diversity and inclusion work. I've done work around, and well, you read my resume, and I keep getting asked back by people. So I've found a way, but I've found a way where I do the things that I feel are in alignment with my pledges to myself and not in conflict with what people in the business want, obviously, since I've been doing it for that long a period of time.
Okay, so
And I find this is something we talked about. I don't make blockbuster movies. I'm a small movie maker. I constantly in business am looking for micro inequities. Where are things that are going on? Where are people diminished? And how can I give feedback so that doesn't happen? And how can I help people in recovery from that? So those things don't leave as big a scar. So that's where a lot of the things that I do are now, is around that kind of stuff. Have been really the kindness and those kind of things are important to me in a business world.
so Mark, I have personally witnessed you take principled stands on behalf of justice and in opposition to micro inequities time and time and time again. And I have seen you being tremendously well respected for that, as opposed to ostracized and labeled a troublemaker and all of that stuff. Can you think of any example of when you've done it, how you've done it? Because I want people to understand what you do and the secret of how you're able to make it work. When I've seen other people try to do it and they flounder, get dismissed, or ignored.
Right. Yeah, well, and again, little things I'm talking about. So let me give you, and these can be big, but a couple, these are little things, but here's my approach to them. In one of the companies that I was working for, a new chief executive of the company, and I was in a role where I had some responsibility for the diversity and inclusion work. And so I'm waiting, and 3 months in, I still haven't heard anything from the gentleman about that. And so I'm trying to figure out how to talk with him about that in a way that won't front him out, be embarrassing to him. And so what can I do with that? This was at a time when we all started getting the iPods and people listening to music on their iPods. And so a favorite question for folks of executives was, hey, what's on your iPod? Are we listening to the same kind of music as you are? And yada, yada, yada. So what I did was I recorded him 2 CDs of music on social consciousness, social justice, with songs from my catalog of music that I thought would be cool, that would help him understand of what it is. And also, he could share, hey, I know we haven't talked much about diversity, but here's some songs I'm listening to, and this is really cool. We're going to be talking more about that. So I recorded those, put CDs in with playlists, had the artists and the songs on it, with a note attached in a confidential envelope that I sent to him in interoffice mail. And in the note, I indicated that I'm sending this to you. It's been 3 months. Part of my accountability is on diversity and inclusion, doing some work with that. You're new to the company. I'm wondering if now might be a time you'd be able to have a conversation about that. And here's a way, maybe I could give you a light way to get into it if you don't want to go too deep, but here's some music for you that I thought you might enjoy listening to and you might share with folks. So what I got back about a week later, same confidential envelope sent back to me with the CDs in it and a sticker note put on my little note, handwritten note to him saying, I'm a person that attends to the critical few things that are most important for the success of this organization, and this is not one of those now.
Whoa.
With his name signed at the bottom. Okay. So the interesting thing from that then was I was in a lot of things, so sustainability work we were doing then on that committee and different things. And so he would come to those meetings and he would see me and he would zero in on the chair farthest from me. He would not make eye contact with me, would not look at me. Not bothered me, dude. So at one time he had to sit next to me. And so he was talking with the person on the other side of me. So he was leaning all the way forward and turning his head. So he was still not making eye contact with me. Finally, in a town hall meeting in an auditorium, I was sitting with another person that he liked. And so she asked a question, raised her hand, asked a question. I waited while several other people asked questions. He was getting pretty close to the end. I raised my hand. And he kept saying, any other questions? Any other questions? Looking around the room, and I kept my hand up and finally said, yes, Mr. Hayes, what do you have for us? And so I actually shared something, a question around diversity that was a pretty easy one for him to answer and answer in a positive way. And, you know, he did that and kind of breathed a sigh of relief. But part of why those things were important to me then in particular wasn't just who I am and all, but the sustainability initiative that we had. That requires, you know, employee engagement polls, and it requires what are the ratings on you and as a company and how you handle sexual orientation as an issue and the protection that's provided. So the intent that I was doing with this was to provide him with, you need to be watching this and let's talk about that. But then I got on the committee and I could do it another way. So that's one example.
Okay, but let's dissect it.
Yeah.
You tried one way, you tried the a soft way and
Right.
multimedia approach. It did not work.
Right.
You then got ostracized, basically. You became,
Right.
you were treated as though you were invisible. Didn't bother me, dude. Why did it? People would have wilted in your position.
Right. Yeah. He knew my reputation in the company. He wasn't going to be able to fire me. And also, the piece that would not be true for most people is I knew with who I am, I can't believe I got to be a director at a company. I was raised to manager roles and director roles at companies with who I am. So I wasn't worried.
Okay.
But let me give you another, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. So, okay. So you can't bother me. So when you did what you did it, I call it a power base.
Right.
People step out without a power base. You had a power base. You were widely known as being effective in your job. So you did not think he could fire you
Right.
because you had a strong enough power base.
Right.
That's what protected you. Right. Did you badmouth him? Did you share?
No. Oh, no.
Okay, so you
Well, I told one other person, but I shared it with one other person. That was it. And my intent was not to turn him out or anything. It was to find that. And so through the other means that I got access to through the sustainability initiative, I was able to achieve my objective without him.
Oh, okay. So that's the other really critical point. Some people would do what
Right.
you did, get the reactions, and then fade into the woodwork. You said, okay, I just went down lane A, that didn't work. I've tried lane B, that didn't work. Let me go
Yeah.
try lane C and get to where I need to go. And if he doesn't have to be a part of it, I can get it anyway.
Yeah. Yep.
So did you agonize? Were you distraught? I know that's
I was puzzled. Why in the world is this so difficult? So when I was at going through the stuff at the work and volunteer work at Center for the Healing of Racism, I was asked to be with other people that had been there for a while now to be on their first board of directors. And that was, oh my goodness, I can't tell you what that felt like. But, corporations, you need, if you're going to be on a board, you have to submit that, get approval. Took 6 weeks for my boss to approve it.
Okay.
I mean, that's something that should have been 2 days.
Okay.
He had all the information. There was nothing there that was anything close to a conflict of interest. And people at the elevators, it's obvious he had talked about it with a lot of people, because some of the white men that I work with, who knew I was going to that stuff, would come by and ask in kind of a sneer, so I understand you're going to be on a board of directors. How did that happen? And ask questions like that. Yeah, they knew what it was. Yeah, for the Center for the Healing of Racism was a board I was going to be on. I don't know if he kept it that long, because he was hoping that they had to make a decision sooner than he was going to sign it. And so I'd come in and tell him, well, I'm sorry, they've rescinded their offer to me and they've got someone else. That may have been why he's keeping it. There wasn't, it was his decision. So, but, and so it was interesting, the reaction from my peers as white managers, and what their reaction was to that.
Okay, so Mark, what did you think about them? Do you? I don't even know how to ask this question. Here you are, white male. You're describing being ostracized by your peers. You were ostracized as a child. White men are looking at you saying, "Oh, that's weird," and yet you're saying, "I'm doing what I do." Why didn't it bother you?
By that time, I pretty much learned that my shelf life on having a friend who is a white male might be 4 or 5 months. I know that's funny. I'm not telling a joke. And I'm sorry, white men out there. I know there are many of you that would have been a very different realization with. But that was the reality for me. I mean, one of the questions we talked about you asking was, what are the consequences of this? And, I have maybe 2 or 3 people now, white males, who I can consider have friendships with, that aren't colored by what I do with my stance on things and all. But it's, it's very rare that I've had white friends. But that was the case when I was younger than that. But the last performance review, I was in a role in the company where it was really kind of a talent management type role, with a number of groups and number of employees, and probably half the employees, maybe 2/3, were people of color, gay. And so I remember, so as to bring those groups together and produce some synergies and make sure there was alignment across the 3 groups, because they really should be working together to work against what we're talking about. The things that we don't want to happen around race and all, and micro inequities. So the review I got at the end of the year when I started that group was really good. All the things that they wanted to see us making progress on were really good, and all. And so we get to the end of the review. He says, the one critical piece of feedback I give to you is, I've had a number of complaints that when you're talking with and interacting with the employees of color in your group, that you're laughing harder and longer and more with them than you are the other employees.
Whoa.
I'm not making that up.
Okay, go ahead.
I was laughing harder with people who were Black or Latino. I was laughing harder with the people who were gay than I was laughing with the white straight people in the group. So, and I'm sorry, we're being kind of funny with this, but there's a question towards the end of this around, what's this mean for you going forward and all? What are the prices we pay for this? I mean, It's serious stuff.
It's serious stuff.
And this goes back to words like racism, equity, uh,
Unaware racism.
yeah, and privilege. Those are the things that, you're laughing harder with this group than me is around a privilege. I am supposed to be the one that is most special to you, not that group. I'm the one that that's that privilege piece. Privilege shows up in so many ways around the racial question, especially more between white and black. Saying white and black even is difficult for folks. It scares them because from that it's going to be racism and privilege, and those things we're going to have to start talking about. I mean, I've made my peace with who my friends are going to be and where I'm going to live and what I do. And I know I'm way past, number of years that most people will be working even. And so it's a very different place I'm in there, but this has been part of who I've tried to be for a long time now.
Questions that people listening to you will, some people might conclude you don't like being white, you're ashamed of being white, say something wrong with being white.
No, I'm talking about individuals who respond to me, not a group who responds to me, but individuals. White males are a group. That's a tougher group, but no, I am, and part of another part of my journey, I mentioned, my parents wouldn't talk about anything to do with family. There were all kinds of family dynamics in our family that just were very strange. So I didn't know anything about my ethnicity. My father's parents died before I was a year old. I don't even know how they died. They never even would tell me that. So I had no knowledge of who I was. So I started doing some research probably around the time of being with the Dialogue Racism stuff, and discovered that mother's side of the family come from the Highlands of Scotland, and my father's side of the family, Ireland, from Derry in Ireland. And so there's a wonderful history of fighting oppression and social justice in those two groups.
Oh, yes.
So, and that was an important piece for me. There's also, for those of us that are Irish, there's how Irish became white was by doing horrible things to people who were black so that they could, be seen as part of the group. So there's that piece to own as well. But no, I'm proud of being who I am, but I'm not, I'm proud of being Irish. I'm proud of being Scottish. Being white is the color of that. I told you before that when I was doing the work with the center, I tried to put everything like we come from a geographical place. Yeah. So I call people European American, African American, Asian American. And when I said to people, told someone, European American men like us, he said, "What are you talking about?" And tried to explain. So I've kind of given up on that, but white is not white or black. It's become who we are in some ways because of our behaviors with each other, but I'm Scottish and I'm Irish.
Okay.
And the white is a designation of that, but I'm Scottish and Irish, and I'm very, very proud of that.
Okay, so if you know that a mutual friend of ours has wanted to hook you up with a white guy he had in his organization, that he and I say, this guy has the potential to be a Mark Hayes. We salivate at the thought that this guy has the potential to be a Mark Hayes. If there's a young up and coming white guy who is facing all of the stuff of that white men face in trying to launch diversity and inclusion initiatives in their company, what advice would you give to white men who want to promote justice and equity in a company when most of the other white men in the company don't understand what they're talking about?
Yeah, I wouldn't. Well, number one, I wouldn't give advice, and I know that's a wording, but but I would visit with them, and I'd be glad to visit with them. And I do those conversations a lot with folks. I mean, one of the main questions I'll ask is, where are you now with that? What have been your experiences? What's been your learning? What are the things that are important to you from what you know right now? What are the things that concern you? So we would very much be asking questions like that. And from that, I get pretty quickly a realization, I think. But where I would go at some point is, so let's look back at all we just said. Are you ready for that? What do you think could be possible obstacles or consequences for you taking that path? And have that conversation. Okay. How comfortable are you using these words? What do these words mean to you? In your life experience, what do these words mean to you? When do you use these in your daily life, in your daily work? Because if you really get serious about this, there will be prices. If you want to continue it, you can always find out where your level of is as you go into this. But you are going to get labeled at times. There are going to be very difficult things that can happen to you. The other piece for me is I got my guardian angel. I've been directed. So this is, again, different. But I said I've had a help with being guided on a journey for me. And I've listened to that and I've followed that. It's taken me places I had no idea I would be able to go as a man. And man, that's, I can't tell you how much that's worth to me, and that I can be in companies and be a man.
Okay, so people of color, listening to you as a white man, you have observed many successful people of color in corporations.
Yeah.
What have you observed that you also have been in a position as a white man to hear other white people talk about them?
Right.
What success factors, what is it that creates success so that the person of color can be themselves and still gain respect?
Yeah. Well, we have a shared friend that went through some difficult times as well as some unbelievably good times. And he's part of my model for answering this. So, wow. Know how the business, all the pieces of the business fit together is number one.
Right.
Absolutely be able to describe to the group of people that you're going to be working with or leading, be able to show that you, as well as anybody in that company, can show them how the pieces fit together and where their individual role fits into things and what that means in terms of possibilities for them moving to other groups, other positions, that kind of thing. You've got to know that company as well as the CEO or anybody else in that company knows, so that folks will have confidence that you really can be a champion for them because you know more than anybody else knows you work for.
Right.
That's number one.
I'm going to say, now, what about people who say that's unfair because white so-and-so person over there, she doesn't know as much and she got promoted?
Yeah, that's right. And so part of this, so this may be outside the bounds of what you're asking a little bit, but diversity. I'm sorry. This is stuff where I know my language is not going to curse or anything, but my language is not going to sound nice. Diversity has been a shell game, Gene. It's been a shell game. It's not real. That's the thing. I was listening to a conversation the other day and still talking about, well, one of the companies that I get to observe is doing a lot, trying to do a lot now on the anti-racism stuff. They started out using the anti-racism language a lot and are now moving more back to the diversity and inclusion. So and talking about hiring targets and stuff. And so the part of the conversation I was sharing with this group from outside was quotas. You know, will those work? How will people react to that? Yada, yada, yada. That's about privilege again. That's about privilege. And so starting conversations now with, I think, where the world has come from and is now, where people are, the starting place now is equity and inclusion, not diversity.
Right.
And until we can do real inclusion and provide real equity, I don't think diversity is going to be any different than what it was before, because we're not changing the primary fundamental element of not being able to talk about things like privilege and equity, use that language in talking about how we're doing these things. And so we never get to where people who have privilege are going to have to take something else. The old shell game to me was like the pea underneath the three kind of pods.
Right.
And you keep moving it around and moving it around. And usually there's a trick to it where no matter which one you lift up, when you get to lifting it up, what's there?
Empty.
Empty. And that to me, we keep moving the shells and hiding the peas, and we're still talking, when we're talking about diversity and hiring, we're still talking about, can we do quotas? Because white people will react negatively to quotas.
Right.
And let me add one more piece to it. And this is again about privilege and the difference. Okay. The untalked about piece that connects with that, because I am white and I am a male, and people do still talk to me when they're angry about things, even though that. So over the years, the statement I've heard from men who are white in these circumstances is, and I'm not kidding with the number of years I'm going to use as the number here. Well, if they do that, I've only got 9 more years to go here, and they're not going to get anything from me but the bare minimum. If they're going to do that, they're not going to get anything from me but the bare minimum. Who in the company has a right to tell their boss, I'm going to slack off for the next 9 years because y'all put quotas in here and somebody else may be getting a job that I could have gotten? Who else has the ability to say that? Okay, and that's what I mean around inclusion, equity, privilege. If we don't start getting those up front in these conversations, I don't think we get anywhere differently than we have, and that would be terribly sad. This is the first time I've had hope that we really can make some breakthroughs with this, but I'm already starting to see now the default back to, it's a diversity conversation. It's around how are we going to do the hiring and how are we going to do this. It's not around equity and anti-racism. It's slipping already away back to the same old questions, and that's why I call it the shell game.
I got it. So the word diversity means numbers, EEOC.
Still does.
Loss of privilege to those who thought that there's a meritocracy and a meritocracy that favored them.
Rather than a privilege system that favors them. Yes.
And so your preferred, that's why you said you when I asked you how to define you said inclusion and equity is what.
Yeah.
That's why.
Yeah. It's right back to diversity and inclusion. I even saw, well, I won't go any farther with that, but yeah, and I think, what I hear people out in the world, Gene, talking about now is equity and inclusion and anti-racism work.
Right.
I know people need jobs and all now, but I hear that's what's being asked for. I don't hear people asking to go back to diversity targets.
Right. So diversity implies targets, implies quotas. Okay, so
and implies that it's always implied that somebody who we wouldn't normally hire, we're going to hire now.
Winners and losers.
Yeah, that's yes.
Okay. Tell me about equity. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, that's the start of what it should mean is that we start, and I hate it, this is oversimplifying it, but the unconscious biases in those things, the micro inequities. For me, it's more unconscious bias. This is just so simple. It's so simple. This was just before we all went home. Last time I was in a meeting with actual folks, and young African-American, young Black woman doing a presentation in a group, just become the manager maybe a month before the meeting around budget numbers, very technical stuff and important financial stuff. So her two bosses are in the room, but clearly they've given this, she's developed the slide deck, it's clear with that, she's making the presentation, doing very well at making the presentation, and she starts getting, and so people start asking questions. Who are they asking the questions to? They're asking questions of the two people in leadership positions that she reports to. And those two guys are all puffed up thinking, oh, cool, we got a chance to really show how much we know about this stuff and share how much thought we've been putting into the budget. And so I'm at the back of the room, and this particular young woman and I have worked a lot together, so we stay pretty synced up. And so as the first question is ending, I'm looking up at her, and we make eye contact, and we both nod our heads. She knows what's going on. So she goes on a little bit, another pause for questions, goes right back to those guys again. And at this time I'm mouthing, do you want to do something? Kind of mouthing that. And she's shaking her head no. So, but she gives me a look like, thank you for noticing. It's not just me. I'm not imagining this. And so she and I talked at the break, after the presentation was finished, and talked about what we wanted to do with that. She didn't want it brought out in the group in that kind of setting. That would feel too risky. But we did agree to talk with the two people that she reports to at the next break and talk about what happened and how those things occur and what to watch for. So, and how to just defer the questions back to her if that happens, and blah, blah, blah. So we did that, and they were going, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. I was really feeling my oats with it too. I was handling some tough questions, not thinking of how that feels for you. So those are the things I'm trying to do all the time.
That's beautiful.
Those are so small. They're small, but they're not. They're so big, because what people don't realize, those things are happening every day, several times a day, often to the same person. So when you look at that as just that's one single thing, no. And then the conversation then from that. So and that's combating privilege. That's understanding what privilege is.
Right.
So those are the things that I try to do all the time, Gene. What I really have liked is we've been doing work for the company related to the high reliability organizations. So like the nuclear folks and hospitals and all. So talking about that a lot in the work that we're doing. In the analogy, and so one of the I think it's 5 factors in that, and one of those is maintaining a chronic unease. Maintaining a chronic unease. That's the way that we find things that we don't find. It's not trying to force ourselves to be negative or anything like that at all, but it's maintaining that sense of chronic unease to make sure we're doing everything we can do to not, in those kind of organizations, to create something that kills a bunch of people, that hurts people. And so that's like become my theme for how I describe what I'm doing. I went to Target one morning, going through the store, young African-American woman, there's some sales on for baby clothes that look like, or young girls' clothes. And I'm walking by here, and I always say hello to people as I pass them in the store, make some eye contact. And So go on, do her shopping, come back, and can see on her face, she's so excited. Oh, this will work. And I can hear her saying those things to herself out loud. So goes up to the checkout, and I'm familiar with that store. And it was early in the morning. There was only one checkout lane, and the woman that was there is white and often rough. But as I walk up, one person ahead of me, another woman who's white, I hear her just berating the young woman. Why are you buying? What are you doing with these clothes? Do you not even know how to hand these to me? I mean, did you not have money to buy any of this stuff before we had this sale? Do you not even know that you need to take this out of this and put this over here? And just really berating her. And I don't know how long I heard that. It seemed like a minute, but I don't think it was that long. And so I asked the woman in front of me, excuse me, do you mind if I step in front of you? I want to talk with the checkout clerk. And she's there with her eyes wide open. She doesn't know what to do. And so, yes, please. And so I walked over and I said to the young woman, I want to talk with the clerk for a minute. Are you okay with that? And she nodded yes, but she didn't have any idea what was going on. And I told the clerk, I need you to look at me. You know, I'm in the store regularly. You've checked me out a number of times. You know who I am. And she's looking at me like, so? I said, I need for you to get control of yourself. I need for you to stop the use of the language that you've been using, and I need for the tone that you're delivering it to this young girl and to change. I don't know if these are the exact words, but this is like what I was saying. And a couple of times as I was going through that, she interrupted me. And I said, stop. You need to change your behavior. So listen to what I have to say and tell me whether you can do that or not. And the next time she interrupted, I said, do I need to get your supervisor for you to hear me on this? And then she stopped. And so I finished, said, you're going to check out the girl. You're not going to give any more of that language. And then when I check out, you and I can talk about whether we need to go talk with the supervisor about this. And I turned to the young girl and I said, does that sound okay to you? And she said, yes. And so got her checked out. As the young girl was leaving, I said, are you okay for going to the car yourself? Or do you need any help? You okay? And she just nodded with some tears in her eyes. And so I thanked the woman that I stepped in front of and said, thank you for letting me do that, and got back in my place in line. Thankfully, no one else had come up in the store. But that's the stuff that I want to watch for and I want to catch. And I don't know. I without dialogue racism, without that, my saying, you know, I will not cooperate, I will not participate in my own oppression. How could I have stood there? How could I have nodded to that young woman and said good morning and been friendly to her, and then come up to the counter, to the checkout, and let that happen to her, Jean?
And Mark, that's why we're here. That's why you're here.
And that's my guardian angels work and a lot of people helping me to understand stuff. I know I do things like that I don't know. And I was trying very hard not to disrespect the clerk.
Well, that's what you were trying not
Because it didn't, if I start talking to her like she's talking with a young woman, that doesn't do anything. So being, trying very hard not to be disrespectful of her. Something triggers us on these things. I don't know what triggered the clerk, but there was something there that was hurtful in her memory around maybe not having the money to buy her children clothing. And here's this young woman, half my age, and she's buying all this stuff on sale, and I got to fold it for her and put it in her bag. I have no idea what was going on in there, but I know there's a story behind it.
Yes. And
so I don't want to berate her. So.
Yes. You were able to stop abusive behavior without berating the abuser, and by thanking the abuser for allowing you to do that.
Yeah.
That is totally marvelous. And I will project, because a white guy stood up for me when I first entered U of H in a meeting.
Wow.
And I remember him till I die. Every time I passed him on campus, I ran up and gave him a hug. I was so excited every time I saw him. And he's thinking, what did I do? And he said, well, Gene, I was just sharing the,
Yeah,
you were there when nobody else
yeah,
was.
yeah. And you were asking me before, what would I share with people who are black coming into an organization, or people who are white who want to participate in this stuff? And, what I do is share some stories.
Yes.
You know, can you do this? Do you want to do this? And what I see so often, we've talked about things like this sometimes with the executives under the head of the organization. Had an incident in particular that happened that I won't get into, but people didn't react and support the woman when something happened that was really bad, that was done by another person in the meeting. It was just silence. And talking about recognizing these things is critical, doing the work to understand what these are and recognizing them. But you got to practice or something. You got to know when these happen, what are you going to do?
Yes.
How are you going to intervene in a way that will make this something that may be a learning moment for everybody around you versus making it worse? So it's not enough to recognize it. Then you also have to think about, okay, how am I going to take action on this? What am I going to say? And I got like 15, 20 seconds to do it before the person that's been targeted is going to either have to answer that themselves, or they've given up hope that somebody's going to support them on it. So it's the second part. That's where I was stumbling a bit when I was talking about, I love, the micro inequities training and stuff, but the other piece of that is make sure, what do I do when I get in that to handle it well? Yes. And there's some good stuff out there, companies giving some good guidance on that kind of stuff, but that's where the courage comes in. That's where the risk is. Yes. And privilege. I have had the choice most of my life, if I wanted to, not to have to do those things. Right. Nobody's going to, there will be obviously situations where people will think less of me there, but for the most part, I would be doing the norm. Right. So.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, thank you for letting me share that last one. That one.
That's the last part is why you're here, and we have to figure out because how you got from there where you were, the making of Mark Hayes.
Oh, yeah, that's embarrassing to hear that.
It's real for me, and it's not only real for me, Mark. I know so many people who appreciate who you are.
Yeah.
And what you've done for them in the company.
Can you tell people how much you've helped me? Can you say that out loud?
I can, but Diallo will cut it out.
Okay, well then let's frame it up a little bit more. So in one of my roles in a company that was a new role, the only reason that I agreed to doing that was I got 6 months of coaching with you to do that role. And okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yes, I forgot about that.
Yeah. So, and one of the things we talked about early on, one of the questions you asked me was not what do I want to accomplish, yada yada, any of that, but who do you want to be in this role, and how does that lead you to getting the results with developing the people and hitting the objectives? How does that contribute to that? Do you remember that conversation?
Vaguely.
Okay.
It's a conversation I have with this. It's what I ask.
Yeah. It's that key question. I may not have said it exactly right, but I think I was pretty close. And that's where I came back and after a lot of thought and thinking about my history, I said, I want to be in a guardian angel role with this group.
Oh, I remember that.
Okay. These are really good people. They're smart people. There are a variety of ways that in the organization, people haven't always seen them as at the level to be able to do the things to move up a level and to do the work that we're talking about in this group. And so I was saying, I think the guardian angel, giving people safety those kind of things, these will be important. And so I want to find ways to be in that place with them when, I'm working with them, having relationships with them. And you help me with that, figure that out and help coach me doing that and watching me do that. So and another gentleman, Jim Galtney, who I worked with for 20 years, who's an amazing man, knows nonverbal behavior and all kinds of psychological types and all. And he spent 20 years helping me to learn things that help me recognize these. Him helping me learn nonverbal behavior is part of what tips me off to the things that we're talking about identifying. And so I can never possibly repay him enough for what he gave me on this. Right. This gives me sight on things from perspectives that other people don't have.
Yes. Oh, that's a very good point. You got nonverbal training.
Yeah. Yes. Deep. I mean, this man went to the Jung Institute in Switzerland to learn his craft. Wow. And transferred that to me for nothing.
Wow.
So that's a good place for me to maybe, I don't know, are we ready to wrap up or?
Yes. Oh yeah.
I'm embarrassed about how much time I've taken in.
Oh, that's fine. I'm sitting up here wondering what are we going to do. I've already conceived of maybe having a 2-part segment because this has been very rich.
Okay.
So we'll see how we handle it. Mark.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know how to express who you are to me. And part of the reason it felt good about doing this at this time, I don't like doing these. I know it's important to, but who we just lost. And so again, if I wasn't going to do this and all I learned from Mary and the faith and trust she had in me, that would just be a ridiculous thing. Right. So this is for Mary as well, Jean.
Great. Thank you. And
okay.
Mary, wherever she is, knows that.
Yeah.
So thank you.
All right. Thank you.